So it's 11:40, so I am going to start. So welcome all to this session. Glad you all came here. I had some fierce competition among the slots, but I'm really happy that you all are here and happy that you could also join on the stairs as well. But before we dive into the interesting stuff, we're going to do an experiment. And for that experiment, you need your phone. And I want to ask you. Oh, that's a spoiler. I want to ask if you want to scan this QR code, and it will lead you to a survey. It doesn't lead you to something malware, but it leads you to a survey. And I need you to fill in as quickly as possible, because we're going to do an experiment, and we are a bit short on time. So please fill it in rather quickly. And if you're done, please raise your hand so everybody knows you're finished, and I know that you're finished as well. So are there already ones who finished the survey? Yeah, ready? Some more people who finished it? Oh, let's wait for a little bit. Ready in front, also ready. Cool, let's move in quickly, ready? Awesome. Cool. It led you to a survey which asked you questions which you think, is it really relevant to software engineering? Yes, probably it is. Because what I did is I conducted an A/B experiment with all of you. And it led you to a survey with 2 questions, but I also split you up into 2 groups, Group A and Group B. So Group A got the question on the right, and Group B got the question on the left. So who had the question on the left? So who was Group A? Awesome. And who was Group B? Oh, so I used the PHP randomizer for that. I learned that the keynote speaker was also a fan of PHP. I was when I was a little kid. No, and not anymore. But I divided you into 2 questions, 2 groups, and it led you to a different question. But you all got the same last question. At what age did Mahatma Gandhi die? And now I'm curious if Group A got a different average or median answer than Group B. And spoiler alert, it probably will. And I'm going to tell you why that is. So before heading to the answer, I will quickly go to the results. So this is the graph that came out of it. And you see Group A had a lower median than Group B. But yeah, that's rather strange, right? Because you all knew maybe Mahatma Gandhi was old, but there is a significant difference between the 2 groups. And you knew 9 years old or 130 years old was rubbish for you, because he can't die at 140, and he didn't die at 9 years old. So that leaves me to the question, what happened here? But before heading to the reason behind it, let's get to the answer, and it's 78 years old. So who had 78? Awesome, you got a prize afterwards. Cool. So the difference can be explained by the anchoring effect. And it effect explains that if you're exposed to information, let's say that first question, it influences the way you think. And already influenced when it's rubbish for you. So how does that work? So if you think about Mahatma Gandhi, then you might recognize his face when we got old. So you knew he was like maybe 60, 70, 80 in that range. You might knew he was from India, so you knew you might know the life expectancy in India. And the little thing we call the anchor, which I put into your head, was the 9 or the 140. That number I put into your brain, and I influenced you. And then when you're going to think about the age, then you think, okay, it might not be 9 years old, but let's move it up a bit. And it was not 140 years old. Let's move it a little bit down. And if you're exposed to this effect, so maybe not everyone was feeling the anchoring effect, but when you're exposed to the anchoring effect, you're going to deviate from the information you have, like the 9 years old, and move it up a bit until you feel comfortable with your answer, and then that will be your answer. And the same goes the opposite for 140 years old. And you don't have to take my word for it, because there is some research which actually asked this same questions to a bunch of people. And this is actually very old, so you can, as you can see from the screenshot. And they ask these questions to people, and they use like different kind of information for this question. So one was the implausible information, like the 140 and 9 years old is implausible because you knew he wasn't 140 and neither was 9 years old. And they have shown that your answer is going to deviate much more when you have that little piece of information just printed in your head just before you're going to answer that question. Although it was not useful for you, as you maybe know. So that leads me to what's this relevant for software engineering, you might think by now. So we also experience the anchoring effect, at least I do. Especially when I'm playing planning poker, for example, and somebody comes into the room and he says, okay, this story or this user story or this PBI, whatever, is going to be very complex and very big. And although you thought, okay, it may be a bit complex, but it wasn't that complex, you might be influenced just because he entered the room and exposed you to that information. And these effects and these patterns of thinking can be identified as cognitive biases. I'm going to tell you a lot of stories today how I am being influenced, and you might be as well. And there's luckily plenty of research about these biases, and there's lots of to explain. But before heading to the interesting stuff, let's introduce myself. I'm an IT consultant and info support. We have a booth here. I'm a software engineer. I'm like, in Dutch we say mannetje van alles. I don't know the English term for it, but I like all things. I like software engineering. I like being a teacher. I'm a teacher at info support as well. And these claims I make are based on empirical evidence, and I show some research which also explains the effect as well. If you want to go to in-depth about these effects, then that will be something you can dive in later on. And you can follow me on Twitter, because I don't hate to name it otherwise. And I want to tell you 3 stories today. 3 ways I am being influenced, and you might be as well. How do they influence? How do they prevent me from being productive or making the right decisions? And maybe important, how can we prevent them from doing any harm in our day-to-day lives? So the first story is about love. 2 years ago, I moved in with my girlfriend, and I needed a bigger closet because I lived alone, and my girlfriend moved in with me, and we needed a bigger place to store our clothes. So what are you going to do if you need a new closet? I leave this up for you. In the Netherlands, you go to Marktplaats is actually the better place, yes. But what we did back in the times was we go to IKEA, because we needed a cheap place for a nice piece of furniture. And if you all know IKEA, you know you have to assemble it yourself. And it will leave you sometimes figured like, how do I assemble this? And it can be kind of tricky. And we went to the store, we bought a closet, and we put in some blood, sweat, and tears in it. And after 2 hours, I was very proud to present you my piece of furniture. And I put some labor in it. It was not easy. It was 2 hours of blood, sweat, and tears, and we actually did it twice because the first time we did it upside down and it didn't work as well. And it left me with some minor defects as well because we had to do it twice, so you have to unplug it and unplug it. But it finally left me with a closet which was functional. And if I ask my girlfriend about the value of this piece of furniture, she thinks, okay, this is just a piece of furniture my friend made me. But if I think about this closet, I really like this closet because I built it myself. I put 2 hours in it, and I think, okay, this is really valuable for me. But if I ask my girlfriend, I don't think she has the same picture or the same value about this piece of furniture as I do. And that left me thinking, what's going on here? And the thing is, there is an explanation for it, and it's called the IKEA effect. And it's actually a part of research and coined by these researchers. And it's all about when you include labor in the building process, it can increase the perceived value by the builder. So I was the builder in this context, and because I put some blood, sweat, and tears in it, it increased my perceived value. Although it has some minor defects you won't expect when you just get the closet yourself, I don't care about that. And they carried out some experiments to show this effect. And one of that was actually in which they defined 2 groups, like the EBAB experiment we did in the beginning. And they had a group of builders and non-builders, and they gave the assemble package to the builders, and they give a box to the non-builders. And they asked the question, do you like this product? Just on a scale from 1 to 5. And it turned out that the builders actually like the product more than the non-builders, like I did with my closet. And in addition, they also ask how much do you want to pay for this product? And you can guess by now, the builders wanted to pay 63% more than the non-builders. And they did a whole lot of experiments around this IKEA effect. But this is the main one, and they also named it after this experiment. So that leaves me to the question, we make stuff, right? As software creators, you might be a coder, or you might configure the platform, or you might be in infrastructure. It all leads to something we build. Are we also subject to the IKEA effect? Well, I definitely am, as I liked my closet enough, a lot. Also in my work, I see that I love the things I make. I love my code. I love the products I make. And especially early in my career, I considered my work as my baby, because I made it, and it felt like, okay, this is mine. I put so much effort in it. I spent all my evenings building this piece of code. However, it distracted me from learning, because especially early in my career, the code wasn't that good. I needed to learn a lot. But because I thought it was very good, it distracted me from learning from my mistakes. So I want to prevent the IKEA effect. So in my day-to-day lives, I also experience it at pull requests. As I open a pull request, are you able to objectively value your work? Or does it sometimes hurt when somebody has a comment and it doesn't value it as much as you do? And ignorance, if you ignore these comments which may hurt you, but it might be a good opportunity to learn and to improve your work. And my question for you is, does this sound familiar? Do you sometimes also love your work, love the pull request, love your code, love your product? Can I see some hands who, I see some people who recognize it? Ah, cool, okay. I didn't saw anyone nodding, so I thought, okay, this might be the first time I tell something that people don't recognize. And it led me to, why are we subjected to this bias? So there are a few explanations, and one may apply to you and one might not apply to you. But in general, people have the need for competency, the psychological need for competency. It turns out that people want to feel competent, and it also research shows that if you feel competent, if you have a lot of self-confidence, it lowers your chances for stress and depression. So it's not strange for you to want to feel competent. And if we carry out these tasks like opening a pull request or building a closet, it will boost your confidence because you can see what you build and you can be proud of that. But it also might be that you are getting overly attached to the things that gives you that boost. And if you think you're very proud and you think, okay, this is something which is great, then it might also hurt you more because you're overly attached to it when you get a negative negative comment on that. So there's also another, it also can be that you want to justify your efforts. So if you put in like 2 hours, you want to feel that it's worth it, that you build it yourself, you screwed in the screws, and you got blood, sweat, and tears. And it could be that that is the reason that you're getting overly attached to the products you make. So how can we prevent the IKEA effect? So there's actually a phase before you're going to build it and a phase after you're going to build it. And I consider these two phases important. Because before we're going to build it, it's actually, you have to ask yourselves, as I'm doing today, do I really need to build this? Or does someone else already got a product which I can use out of the box? And also after the work, how to assess your work, how to assess your baby more objectively. And especially before you're going to build it, I really consider tapping into external solutions or external knowledge to be very important. Because then I might not do all the work because there's already people that did the work before me, which will lead me to getting much lesser attached to my product. And there are people or companies that are really stubborn, which want to build everything from scratch, everything in-house, but that might lead you to a stronger IKEA effect. Because when you build things from scratch, you have to take into account the investment, because you need a lot of time and a lot of money for it. You have maybe have a longer time to market. Also, you have to maintain it from now on, and you have to deal with all the changes which are going to come. And also other problems may arise, because you might not be the expert in the things you are building from scratch, and you might have not know the problems you're going to face. And therefore, the third-party giants are really a good example of great knowledge, and they have been stumbled around these problems already. So we should make use of that. So what I don't want to tell you is that you think by now, oh, I should use Node modules or Java packages or whatever for every single problem, because this is a package is odd, And what I find odd that it's 1.9 downloaded 1.9 times 1.9 million times downloaded a month, and it's just a single line. Just it tells me if there is a number which is odd. And there already is a new package I didn't include in the slides. Is odd AI, which which uses an LLM to tell you if the number is odd. And it's already downloaded 33 million times in total, which is kind of scary. So this is not the thing I mean. But if we encounter problems, we use technology, we use external solutions, remember that you're not the first to a problem. Even in new technologies, there are already problems which have been solved already for you. And therefore, I find these conferences so valuable because you meet people that solve these problems. And it's a good habit to visit, maybe not all of them, but once in a time to know about which problems have been solved. Which problems do I not need to solve again, but are solved by others, and to learn from them. So one thing I find very useful is to, if you make a decision to build it yourself or to you build it yourself or to use an external solution for that, is to write it down in for example, an architectural decision record. Because it allows you to evaluate your problem or your decision. It lets you, you can show others if you are being biased or not. Because they can just point out, oh, you didn't look into external solutions. And the most important thing is the problem. Do you know the problem well enough? And did you consider all the options that there are around, or the most important options? And also the considerations. So did you really consider all the options? And what are you going to win and what are you going to lose if you're going for that specific option? Because that enables you to being aware of your bias. Because by now, if you write down the architectural decision record and you know, okay, I might be biased, I'm going to write it down and I'm going to evaluate it with the rest of my team or some other colleague that I know well enough, then you're being aware of your bias. And then you can admit to yourself, okay, I might be biased, I might love it because I built it. Because I really think if we are being more honest about the value of your work, it will lead you to better products and better decisions. Cool. So this is story number 1. Story number 2 is about majority and joining the majority. So if I look at these conferences and I look online on Reddit, for example, I see all these great technologies popping up. And it's like Agile, Kubernetes, and of course the latest one, AI. And it's very visible for all of us. It's because it's on every conference now. AI is the most epic thing. It will solve everything, right? It will give the world peace. And it will lead me to the second story. Because I think 3 years ago, I had the opportunity to do a greenfield project. And I was really enthusiastic about conferences and all these new technologies. And we thought, okay, wow, a greenfield project. We felt like kids in the candy store. We felt like, oh, we've been to the conferences, we've seen all these technologies, now it's our time to use all of them. And we did. So we used domain-driven design, although we weren't experts in that field yet. By now we are. Event-driven architecture fitted really well to domain-driven design, so let's go with that. What was it? Cloud native, because everything should be in the cloud, right? And we did specification, for example, event sourcing, microservices, because who does monoliths by now, CQRS, which fitted really nicely to event-driven architecture. And we picked quite a few new technologies here. The technologies we have seen at conferences. And of course, we did DevOps, because that's a good thing to do. But because we did all of these new technologies, the struggle was real, because we had to learn these new technologies and apply them at the same time. We were making quite a few problems, mistakes, I can say. Because it's really hard to being productive and learning new stuff. And rework was inevitable. And we did quite a few rework, so we fixed the problems, but it was really challenging. And the thing we experienced can be explained by the bandwagon effect. And it's a term originates in the 19th century of American politics and parades. By then they did a parade which was like, it's like a cart with horses in front, and they making sound on them. Everybody want to follow that bandwagon. And it explains that we have the tendency to follow people with the same. We have the tendency to follow a crowd, to follow something that's moving forward. And it's symbolizing the desire to be part of something that is gaining momentum or widespread acceptance, like the new technology we see in this conference and in the whole world. And you don't see it in conferences or in software. You can see it everywhere. You can see it in stocks, like these meme coins. You can see it in social media, like the viral post. If something goes viral, more people going to like the post, and it's going to the sky. And even in politics. And there's actually a great research which shows this effect in politics in Hungary, because they have the multi-party system there in 2 rounds. They saw that one party in the first round was gaining momentum, and that people therefore going to switch their vote to the party that's gaining momentum. And in software, I sometimes experience the bandwagon effect in a meeting. Because I was in a meeting a few years ago when somebody introduced GraphQL. So who of you know GraphQL? Awesome. Who think it's better than REST? Oh, wow. Okay, that's what I was expecting. So I agree with most of you, and we're going to have a good discussion after. So one would said, okay, GraphQL is a great technology, and we should switch from REST to GraphQL. And there were people who went to conferences and really liked new technology, which joined the initiative. And other people joined as well. It gained momentum in the meeting itself already, not even inside the company, but it gained momentum in the meeting. But I thought, if we think about this rationally, it might not be the best fit for purpose. REST is just fine. It's not because it is new technology and it's more flexible that we should switch to GraphQL. But when it's gaining momentum, it is really difficult to stop it. Because if you're the last who opt in or opt out, then you need to be brave to say, okay, I don't consider this a good option or a thing that we have to go through. Because stopping a moving train is sometimes pretty hard and also dangerous sometimes. But if you are basing your technology choices, like these choices, on popularity instead of eligibility, it can cost you a lot of money, and it doesn't leave you always for a best fit for purpose. And I already see it around, like, are you still working on a monolith? So there's not much wrong with monoliths, but microservices was the way to go, right? And now it's more a modular monolith. But you might get these questions from your peers or from your colleagues. So it requires you to be brave. And if you've been to the keynote of Tom this morning, I thought this picture would fit in nicely here. Like the cowardly lion was also needed to be brave. And we need to be brave in this to stop a bandwagon. Because going against the bandwagon requires bravery. And another example is at this conference. So there are a lot of conferences where you can indicate how many votes you have, how many people are planning to go to your session. And you can see if you track these votes that the ones who got the most votes and gain momentum, people tend to join that session as well. And it might not be the best session for you at that slot, but you might think, okay, a lot of people go to that session and then they are joining. And luckily, that's not the case here at JFL. So you're not being influenced here. So why are we subjected to this bias? So there might be a few explanations here. The availability heuristic is one explanation. So if you make a decision, it can cost you mental energy. And you have limited supply every day. And people tend to be a little bit lazy and use heuristics, which you can see as shortcuts. So one shortcut can be that if something's top of mind or a lot of people do the same, that you make the same decision as well. It might be just to preserve that mental energy for your, whatever you want to put on, to spend that energy on. And that might be an explanation that you make that decision. Because making another decision can cause you to spend more energy on thinking it through, thinking, is this session or is this technology really solving the problem I want to? And when it's available for you, then it's top of mind. When some things are top of mind, you can also easily recall that information, and it also costs you less energy. And one thing you really use in these kinds of influences is the hype cycle. So when you can think about this hype cycle, when hypes are emerging, they tend to be very available for you. So when GraphQL was getting traction, I could look at this hype cycle and it tells me if it's very visible for me. It might indicate me that we are being influenced because there is a lot of publicity on that for that technology. And therefore you also can switch it from visibility to availability. There might be other explanations like social proof. So that's when people look at others how to behave. So you might think, okay, so if others behave this way, I should be doing the same. People tend to have the desire to be liked or accepted. So that if you want to be part of the group who does microservices, you might have the desire to be part of that group as well. And there's also people that think the majority is right. So if the majority goes to that session, I go to that session as well. So there might be some things that going on which leads you to be biased in this way. And it might be subconscious, so it might not be that you are really thinking it through and you thinking, okay, I need to join the majority, but it might be your subconscious which feeds you this information. So that leads me to how can we prevent the bandwagon effect. So step one is where I left off with the IKEA effect, is being aware of your bias. Identify when you join a majority. So that can be a trigger for you to think it through and to think, okay, should I be joining this majority? Did I really think it through? And that's a trigger you can build in yourself and you can practice it from time to time. You can educate yourself with the hype cycle. So I think it's a good practice from now and then to visit these sources like Gartner ThoughtWorks, which describe new technologies and also describe what does it deliver and what is also the unknowns or what are the problems with these new technologies. And if you go to new technologies, which is great, but you have to ask yourself these questions, I do, at least. So what problems does it solve? And do I really have that problem? Or do I just need to add something to my resume? Do I have the problem? Yes, that was second. And do I fully understand the trade-off? And that's something I consider very important, because there's always a trade-off. It doesn't have only positive things. There are also some negative things, and that's fine. But if you're aware of that, it will lead you to a good decision. At least you think it through. And in addition to that, what complexity does it add? Because it might not be obvious for you, but it might add some complexity. And if you don't know where the complexity is going to add, then you might have to think about it more thoroughly. So there is another bias which is closely related to this bias, which is the survivorship bias. I'm not going to in-depth about that. There are two colleagues of mine which actually, there are some recordings of JFall, but this is the one on JCon. If you grab the slides afterwards, I will give you a link, then you can go and see that talk. But I'm convinced that we make better software when we don't jump on these bandwagons. Jumping on bandwagons is also something I won't recommend, but I think in software it's a great idea just to think it through. Cool. So, loving the ceremony, which is the final story I'm going to tell today. So, when I prepared this presentation like a few years ago, I had to visit my grandmother, which was in the hospital, and it was during the time that there was a new king in the UK. And it was during the time of the coronation of King Charles. And my grandmother loved the splendor, loved the whole day, all the things that were going on that day. And I thought he was already king, and why do they need all these ceremonies? So it costs a lot of money, so why do we need to, why is that? Why do we want this ceremony? And I see it also in our day-to-day lives, at least in my software career. I see all these meetings, like stand-up, refinements, retro, plannings, review, one-on-ones. There are a lot of meetings, and sometimes I have the feeling that as a senior developer, when I become a senior developer, I have 8 hours of meeting a day. And I don't think all these meetings are useful. Some more than others. Some are more about the ceremony, let's do it this way because we did it yesterday, for example, with stand-ups. But we love it anyway. People tend to love it anyway. And so why is that? So there is some underlying effect, and it's about that people tend to focus on the trivial tasks, like doing these stand-ups, and overlooking the more important stuff. So when you're doing stand-ups and you only tell others what you're doing the day before, it might just be a ceremony, because they can see it on the sprint board, for example. But the hard questions are we going to make this sprint? Do we have significant problems which we need to help each other? But that are the hard questions, because when we ask those questions, we have to think, we have to spend our mental energy on these hard questions. And there is an illustration which I want to show with you, which indicates it very clearly. It's like, because it is called the bike shedding effect. And it explains that we tend to discuss the things which are very trivial for us, like, what did you do today? But not the really difficult questions. And they explain it with the nuclear power plant and the bike shed. So we tend to spend more money and more resources on what is the color of the bike shed than how to build a nuclear power plant. And there's also another example. So who of you are categorizing their emails in folders? Okay, I thought there were less people doing that, so now it's going up. And there is a research which actually shows that people do this, and it's like a very trivial for you, right? I got an email in, and I categorize it into important or my important stuff or whatever folder structure you choose. And the research actually shows that it costs you a whole lot of time doing it, like 67 hours a year, and it actually makes it harder for you to find your emails. It might not apply to all of you, probably it won't, but it is a really trivial task people carry out each day, which might lead you to more waste. So if you want to explain the bike setting effect, I always consider this graph. So if you have tasks, you have like the consequential and the trivial X in the middle. So the more consequential tasks are really the things which are really important, which are consequential, which has consequences. And the trivial tasks don't have that much consequences. And you have like the easy and hard, so the easy task and the hard task. So the bike shedding effect is really taking place in the task, in the easy and trivial tasks. We tend to spend more time on those tasks than we really need to. And there is actually the maintainer of FreeBSD. He has a whole epistle about this effect because he was really angry about people that were discussing nonsense. And he said, just because you're capable of building a bike shed, you not need to argue about every little feature just because you know enough to do so. And it hurt me at first, because I do that too. I do that as well, right? Because sometimes we had discussions about tabs versus spaces. So, and it hurt me a little. So it kept me from why are we subjected to this bias? So it's fun? Maybe. It's important because the devil are in the details? I don't think so. One explanation might be that we feel much more comfortable with these tasks. So remember the mental energy thing. It doesn't cost us a lot of energy to talk about the bike set and which color it needs to be. You know what a bike set is, and you have seen them like millions of times, and it doesn't cost you a lot of energy. And in our work, and I already mentioned it, I get these tasks or these discussions a whole lot of times. It's like tab versus spaces, single quotes versus double quotes. Sometimes we have flame wars about tools. We spend a lot of times on these discussions. And in pull requests it's the same. Like, please use, this is one of my favorites, please use collections.empty list instead of list.off. If you spend like 5 minutes and discussing it every time, every pull request, and discussing why you should doing the one or the other, then you might be bike shedding. Because is it really important? I don't think so. Maybe it's important to do it once, not every time. And another one is make sure you use the final keyword. And this is actually my favorite. Please use the Stream API. It will be much faster. I had this comment once, and it will lead you to a discussion what's faster, the empirical approach or the functional approach with streams, and you will go through the rabbit hole of figuring out what's faster than that, and then you're going to do it. You're going to rewrite it in the streams, and then you are done for the day. You spend the whole day and figuring out that the streams API isn't faster. So. But we like to do it, right? It's interesting sometimes, but it's not very valuable for our work every single time. So how can we prevent the IKEA of the bike setting effect? So we are in the business of automation. So let's automate this. We can capture it once and enforce it automatically. because it might be important, but it is important to capture it and then discuss with your team. Are we going to do collections but empty list or the other options? But capture it once and apply it everywhere. And there are tools for that. ArrowPromo by Google, Checkstyle, Sonar, Spotless, and OpenRewrite are great examples to enable you to capture it and enforce it in your pipeline or in your process. And another thing I consider is I want to make the meetings worth my time. And what it helps me is to add some structure. So set a goal for each meeting, keep on topic, focus on outcomes. If we structurize our meetings, then it's much more easier to focus on what should we actually be discussing in this meeting. And what I don't mean is that we should install shock collars on our colleagues, which enables you to, when somebody is going to off topic, to shock them. But that's just a joke. And I'm confident that when we minimize our bike shedding, that it will lead you to a higher productivity, because you can spend the time you did bike shedding on much more consequential tasks. Tasks that are important for our businesses, for the world we live in. Cool. So that's the 3 stories I want to tell you today, and I will leave you to like a short summary. We discussed about the IKEA effect. So when labor leads to love, when you build something, you're getting more attached to the thing you just made. The bite-setting effect, when conferences, when new technology and information will clutter your decision-making. And the bike-setting effect when you're wasting your time on the trivial matters. And I'm convinced that if we are aware of your bias, so if you should take one thing away of this talk, is this. If you're aware of your bias, then you're much more capable of fixing these biases. And you're able to battle your biased brain. So if you think back in hindsight, as if I had done the things differently, it will lead to world peace, for example, then you are being influenced by the hindsight bias, and you can think Captain Obvious. Because the hindsight bias, I'm not going into it today, but it's that people are convinced that some events were predictable or inevitable. So that leaves me to the man who started us today. The future depends on what you do today. Thank you for your attention. The slides you can scan the QR code and you can grab the slides. And I would love to see your rating in the app. So if you have a good rating or a bad rating, whatever, please put it there and be nice. Thank you.